This is on those matters. It won't matter whether I'm on the left side of the ship or the right side of the ship. If the entire ship goes under, we will all lose our freedoms, and then we'll have abortion policy like China. And I don't want that to happen. So I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not going to introduce legislation to do that. But I will vote my conscience on any legislation that comes before me, and I will vote in favor of it and co-sponsor it. I just need to be honest about what my focus is going to be on when I get there. If we right the ship, and I'm still in office, and we're fiscally sound, you can bet I will turn toward the things that will restore America's greatness in the social area.
Yes, I will. I liken it to the analogy I gave about slavery, where in our Declaration it was so clear that all men are created equal. And yet, in spite of that very simple and plain truth that our founders said was self-evident, we still couldn't get it right. And we ultimately had to fight a war and amend the Constitution to make it right. Now, I'm hoping there's not going to be any war over this, but I will be very happy to sponsor legislation to define life as beginning at conception, personhood, life, human life, and to protect human life from conception until natural death. And I think it's very important that we get it right. Paul's right. We do have to change hearts and minds, just like William Wilberforce did in England. But he tried hard for a long time before he finally cracked the nut. And if that's what we need to do, then that's what we need to do. We need to have the courage to do exactly that, because we will prevail, because our cause is the cause of truth.
Yes. Simple.
Rodney, we're giving 2 minutes to answer, so if you want to fill your time.
No, really. You have a living sperm and a living egg, so it's alive before it starts. And that little rubber thing that you had there, how old was that?
10 weeks.
10 weeks. Okay. So, as I was talking to a liberal one day, and I said, you found out it's a boy, huh? I said, yeah, wow. How old? He said, well, it's about 20 weeks. I said, wow. So what are you going to do when it becomes human at 26 weeks? And he just looked at me. I said, well, you're the one that defined humanity at 26 weeks. You found out it's a boy before 26 weeks. What is it today? And he couldn't answer the question. I said, look, you know it's a boy. You've got the gender. You've got the DNA. You've got everything you need to know that it's human. If you cut it up and say, okay, give it to a forensic scientist and say, what is it? They would say, it's human. Then you take that forensic scientist and you say, well, I'm sorry, it was a fetus that was under 26 weeks. I recant everything. It's not human anymore. So the forensic doctor is going to look at this thing and say, it has everything that makes it human, that makes it a male. And he just looked at me dumbfounded and, of course, got very angry and started calling me names. But the fact is, it starts at conception. And that's really what we have to protect. The constitutional right to life doesn't start when someone decides it should. A pregnant woman, for example, gets punched in the stomach, it causes a miscarriage. Was it an abortion? Or was it a miscarriage? Well, it depends on how she felt that particular day. Was it Tuesday? It doesn't work that way. Because she chose to make it human or not human is not her choice to make. I think God decided that it's human, and we need to follow the ways of the Lord.
Washington State recently legalized assisted suicide. Many in the medical community admit that euthanasia or passive euthanasia is already happening here and in other states. As we saw with the recent health care bill, it is likely that implementing both assisted suicide and euthanasia at the federal level will be attempted as a cost-controlling measure, especially with the aging baby boomer population. As a senator, how will you fight to cut costs and prevent the government from, killing people as a cost-saving measure? What solutions do you have for the state of health care in the country?
Understanding the problems with health care, in my view, as we have in this state and in every state, individual mandate coverage items. This contains everything from treating alcoholism as part of your health insurance policy, whether you like it or not, including breast reconstruction and several. There are 51 total in this state. What they want to do is they want to take all these and make them at a federal level so that your policy contains all these mandates, and I put them on my website, rodriguer.com, all these mandates at a federal level. Now what that does is it makes it, now imagine you go get car insurance and you want to insure your car. Well, now we're going to insure your tires. Now we have to insure your gas tank, and we're going to insure this and that, and all these things on your car. They go, wait a minute, I can just pay that out of my pocket. It doesn't break down that often. So what my proposal is, stop it at the state level the best I can, working with local, our state representatives, and making sure it never makes it to the federal level. The cost savings really comes in is efficiency, which the government, I don't think they know what that means, and getting these individual mandate coverage items optional, not mandatory. Give me a checklist. Hey, I want that, I want that, I want that, I want that. But don't make them part of my policy. I'm not an alcoholic. I drank once in my life, didn't like it. I don't need alcoholic recovery on my health insurance policy. Now, if you go to Ohio, where they don't have very many of these things, their cost is considerably less. So then I think the biggest problem we're facing is these individual mandate coverage items that are state by state that need to be removed, stopped from ever getting to the federal level, and the federal government has no business in health care. They have no business trying to run it. God, they can't run anything now. Why would we trust them anywhere near my health care? They've messed it up enough with these mandated coverage items.
Okay, great.
The question of euthanasia, brings to mind two things for me. And some of you might remember, if you're as old as I am, two films, Soylent Green and Logan's Run. Those were introduced to me when I was a young kid, and I didn't quite grasp what that was all about, but it really makes you think today. Now, euthanasia is a very emotionally charged issue as well, because although I don't think that I know some doctors have helped people hasten death, even when euthanasia has been illegal. Over the years, and in that private relationship that goes on, I know that some have helped in very minor ways when people have been suffering. And I know that doctors have made decisions, for instance, similar to my own grandmother's. When she was dying, she just stopped. She refused to eat. And they could have force-fed her, but they let her die. And I happened to show up on the night when she was on her deathbed in reflexive breathing. And we sat as my uncle, who is a doctor, and she was already dead, but her body didn't know it yet. And so I've seen that process, and it's very, very emotionally charged. So I understand where people are coming from when they say, if we're allowing that to happen in merciful circumstances, why don't we legalize it? Well, the very reason we don't legalize euthanasia is because then somebody will create a committee to then expand it and regulate it and promote it. And that's why euthanasia, to me, needs to remain illegal, so that we do not get involved in that decision. I do not want doctors hastening death, but I understand in certain very limited circumstances, in that personal relationship with the patient, that they may say, I'm not going to force feed you, or I'm going to let you make a decision not to take your drugs, in which case they're letting them die. And I'm not going to oppose that. I'm not going to get in between that. Now, the health care question you asked at the end, how many minutes did you give us? 2? Yeah, I'm just going to point out the scope of the problem. Number one, there's a key date. It's also the date that I was born, or the year, 1965. What happened in 1965? The creation of Medicare. Since government created Medicare, that's when health care costs began to rise. You can go look at the graphs. Government involvement in that process made it worse. And more government involvement will make it worse than that. We can't even imagine what it would be like to